Weirdly, I'm not introverted in the slightest. If you've ever met me in person, I'm fairly loud and outgoing. In college, I did theater.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by a longtime friend and a longtime comic artist in the webcomic / comic illustration industry. He is, of course, the creator of Phineus Magician for Hire. Now it's called A Phineus Story Magician for Hire. We are joined today by the ever-talented Barry Linck. How are you doing today, Barry?
Hey, how you doing, Kurt? Good to see you.
So, as I said in the pre-show there, it's been literally 10 years since you've been on the show. So, congratulations, welcome back.
Thank you. Congratulations for 12 years of doing this. So awesome.
So, by the time I was into my second year of the show, you were pretty much like 18 years into the comic itself.
I've been working on it since high school. Well, I mean, I technically the comic as we know it since my senior year in college. The very first if you go on the website and you see issue 0, that is the very first full-length story I did in my comic drawing class at Edinburgh University in 1991. So that's 30 years.
When we talked, though, you're halfway through the comic itself. You had already established the Phineus and Sara, the characters, and you were slowly getting into the kids were born, etc. You really thought this comic out from beginning to end, and I know we talked about it way back when, but you have an end game for this entire comic as well, too.
Yeah, I do. I've had this sort of planned out for years. If you go on my website, I actually have a timeline. It shows, the end game. Unfortunately or fortunately for me, the comic usually basically ages as we age. So now I did with the new stuff, Magician for Hire, I have jumped ahead 15 years in the future, so I could focus a little bit more on Finn and Sarah's kids. But Finn and Sara are still in there. Cole and Ro are their daughters. They're also magicians. It focuses on Cole, their oldest daughter. But yeah, I have things planned. Not like every step of the way, but I have certain points in history to touch on, and character development. It's character development. Slowly, developing characters, just like we age, the characters age. So.
Because it's been a while since I've read it, so I kind of caught up a little bit with the archive itself there. I'm loving the gray beard and locks of Phineus there. He's really like aged into that silver-haired fox type character.
Kind of taken after me.
Yeah,
Phineus was always sort of a caricature of myself. So when he had long hair and a ponytail, I had long hair and a ponytail. So I'm not quite as magically powerful as he is. I always liked comics like Savage Dragon, different comics that actually the characters aged along with the readers. Having somebody perpetually 18 years old really doesn't do much for me. I like to think that as it continues, my writing's getting better, my art's getting better. I think the stories are getting better and a little bit more compelling. So we'll see.
Let's talk about your writing style for a second here, and we'll get into your art after, because I do love the new art style. It's definitely filled out a lot more since the beginning of the comic series. So you're doing an awesome job with that.
Thank you.
From a writing perspective, dealing with multiple characters and of course multiple storylines, because they're not all on the same path. Obviously, everyone has their own motives. How has Phineus and Sara evolved from when you first started to where they are today from a writing perspective?
Well, initially, even before the series proper started, the characters were created when I was in high school, and they were an absolute ripoff of a combination of Highlander and Mage, and it just didn't work. So Sara was initially the damsel in distress, and Phineus was an extra-dimensional being that came to save her. And clearly, if you've ever read the comic, Sara doesn't need saved by anybody. So as I've written it, I think the characters, uh, whereas they might have been like um, a caricature of like the hero and a girl with a gun, I like to think that they have real personalities. They've gone through their share of problems and issues. uh they Phineas was seduced by a vampire, and Sara was ticked off for months about it. I like to think that like the things that they do have real life consequences, or at least seem like they do. They're just cartoon characters, but I like to think that they're written like, if that were to happen, that's something that could actually happen, or how they would react to it. um I've long said that even though it's called Phineas, Sara is the heart of the comic.
Yeah.
And she's the one that keeps everybody in the family grounded. She's she's basically Princess Leia. She's like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Just do what I say, and everything will be fine. Everything I do is very heavily influenced by Star Wars.
No, I couldn't tell. It's great to have strong main characters, but you also have strong kids as well. I mean, they've grown up in a stable-ish household. They've done well for themselves, at least growing up, with, of course, the mistakes that do occur in teenage life.
Yeah, Cole. She's sort of the main character. It's basically the newer stories are how she and Phineas like react to each other, because she is way too much like her dad and gets into way too much trouble, and that's what upsets him the most. So he's overprotective, but she just wants to go out and do what he does, fight monsters and solve problems and stuff like that. So the younger sister, Rose, she's still in four-year university studying magic. She's actually a major in, let me try to remember what I called it, math magician. She's a math magician, basically. And in my universe, this is one of the more powerful magics. You're basically using mathematics to unlock the secrets of the universe, because math is a universal truth. Aliens in other galaxies, math is math. And even though I'm not good at math, it'll turn out somewhere down the road that Ro is very powerful because she understands math, math magic. So again, slow burn. We probably won't see anything along those lines for a couple of years, but that's the plan in my head. So.
Well, I'm sure it'll be perfectly fine in the future. And math was never my favorite subject either, so I was never a good student. So I'm glad someone's at least enjoying it.
Yeah, not me.
Exactly. So with the universe that you've created and the evolution of not only in real time but also in the comic itself, have you focused on major events from real life and inputted it into the comic, or have you just created your own major events that kind of shape your characters?
Pretty much created my own events. I had a big arc back in 2013, the Kali saga, basically where the goddess Kali tried to take over the world. And there were monsters and attacks and big wars and stuff like that. And in my universe, that event sort of changed the way everything happens in the world, because up until that point, magic and monsters were secret. Nobody really knew about it. It was all hush hush. But once Tokyo gets trampled by Godzilla and monsters are raiding the cities, and Cleveland gets destroyed yet again by monsters, the cat was sort of out of the bag. And that event sort of changed the way things happen in the real world of my comic. So monsters don't have to hide quite so much. And I do have allegories that of racism, because certain people, Phineas included, don't treat monsters and goblins and stuff very nicely. That they're second class citizens because they're just monsters. And I have some other stories planned for that kind of thing. I try not to get too political, anything specific from our real world, but I do have some allegories.
It's the process of being a creative person, which is is difficult. So the real question then, and we'll get to the art in a second, how have you stayed sane all these years?
by writing and drawing as much as possible. It always kept me grounded. There up until a little while ago, I had two jobs. I work in printing, and you got to do what you got to do. So working two jobs, the only thing I could really do to keep myself focused and sane was to draw and to write, and to keep doing this stuff. About 2.5 years ago, I was in a very serious car accident. I was driving home from work, and a car basically hit a car in the oncoming lane and then hit me head on, caused the car to roll over. I woke up hanging from the seat belts. Then my worst fear was my hands got mangled. I broke my right hand here, so I was all bandaged up, and my drawing thumb, I don't know if you can see how giant this thumb is, was torn open and bent backwards. So there was a real fear that was I going to be able to draw again. I had both hands bandaged up for months. The pain in my hands, I went through the physical therapy and all that, but I had to draw, just because that's my nature. I need to draw. So I basically teach myself how to draw with a drawing thumb that doesn't bend. So it was challenging, but goes to show you the lengths that I will do to draw and tell stories.
And persevere through a heck of an incident and life-changing, definitely life-altering event there.
And it could have been so much worse. Thankfully, I had my seatbelt, and I didn't end up through the windshield. I ended up with a minor concussion, and my hands were mangled, but everything else was fine. So, it's a miracle.
Your comic is your solace. Like, it is your life, truly. And it's
exactly.
Everyone.
I have a cat on my lap.
Oh, that's cool. That's like, so magically you just grew a tail. Congratulations.
I just grew a tail, yeah.
That's hilarious. Cats are always welcome on the show.
So this is Chloe.
Aww.
Say hi, Chloe. She couldn't care less.
Yeah.
She just wants to be the center of attention.
That's okay. Your lower third's covering the tail anyhow for the most part.
Just this strange thing here.
Yeah, cattails aside, unless you had a cattail in the comic, that would be funny too. But with all the stories that you've done, looking at the first 10 years, and if we split your comic up into threes, the first 10 years of your comic, what was your favorite arc and least favorite arc?
Okay, so up through 2009, probably. It was a storyline that was written by my friend Brian Babiock. It was the Great Jaguar Paw, which had introduced the super group that Sara was in before she and Phineus met each other, and an ancient evil wizard, and it was a 3-part storyline that we did. That was a lot of fun, and I think my art took a big leap forward during that arc. And there was another 2-part story that I really enjoyed around that time, which was initially supposed to be the second issue of Phineus a long time ago. But it was the Sara versus the Gobbo slavers, which was a lot of fun. So those were cool story arcs. A lot of the stories along those times were, Monster of the Week. They were one issue, then the next issue was a different thing. Those were, longer stories that took a little bit longer to tell.
Then getting into the middle part of your career here, year 10 to 20, though, your art style improved from what I could see, definitely for sure. And you're refining your style, I think, at least what I read from years 10 to 20. And what changed in your style specifically that you're like, what, I my shadows are improving, or maybe my figure drawing is improving? What was it?
It really practice. The more you draw, the better you get at it if you're doing it right. And I draw a lot, and especially during the second 10 years, I drew more than I did in the first 10 years. So it was a lot of focus and a lot of just drawing. I was doing, the Phineus comics at the time. I was doing some other, side stories. buddy of mine, James Riot, had a comic called Bastard Who, so I did a brother comic with that. I did a couple issues of basically I had the master character, and I was also doing, during that period, I was doing a 3 times a week strip with Brian Babia called Weirdlings, which was like, what if Cthulhu lived next door? So all that, I was teaching myself how to color on the computer. I was drawing more than I had been drawing. And a long time ago, when I was in college, we had a master class by Chuck Jones. And actually over my shoulder here is a couple of pieces of art that Chuck Jones had drawn when he was at Edinburgh University doing the master class. And he said that, and I always remember this, that he said that every artist has a certain number of bad drawings in them, and the key is to get them out as early as possible. So practice. The more you draw, the more you write, the better at both things you will get. So, and it was just a matter of, I just drew and drew and drew. Like every waking moment I drew. And I think that's, where it all came together.
This most recent decade, I'm not going to say last decade, because you still have way more decades ahead of you, for sure.
Yeah.
With this,
it's not the final decade.
Yeah. But what have you enjoyed about this most current decade? Well,
the Poly Saga was huge for me. I thought long and hard about doing that. I did that, like I said, in 2013. So that was, that's this last, decade, or this past decade. And I did think long and hard. I had been reading a lot of mythology, Joseph Campbell specifically. And I basically followed through with the hero's journey with that entire storyline that ran for a year. And I was basically putting out a shortened issue every month for a whole year to complete that story. And I'm really still very proud of that storyline. And then a couple of years later, I did The Hollow Earth, which I sort of followed a similar path. It wasn't nearly as grueling because when I was drawing constantly for the Kali Saga to get it finished in 1 year, and I sort of let myself take a little bit longer with The Hollow Earth because it was stressing me out too much. But I basically was learning how to make the colors a little bit more muted, not quite so garish. And basically learning how to use Photoshop. I at that time I drew everything pen and paper, pencil on paper. I inked it, I scanned it, put it into the computer, did all the coloring in Photoshop, and then did all the lettering in illustration, in Illustrator, and then later in InDesign. Currently, the last probably 3 years, I've been doing all of my artwork on my phone.
What?
I have, and more Star Wars stuff on here, but I have a Metabank Paint and a Note 10 Android with a stylus built in.
Wow.
And I've been drawing all of the most recent comics on my phone.
That's amazing.
I do have a tablet. I have a Galaxy tablet as well, so I can switch, but most of what you see have been done on my phone. Being able to draw digitally, color digitally, do everything in there, and it goes everywhere with me. So if I'm at a doctor's appointment, I could sit there and draw, or if I have a slow time when I'm at work, I can sit there and draw. Or if I'm sitting there in the living room with the family watching TV, I can sit there and draw. So, but everything I've done since I think January of 2018, I want to say, has been on the phone. It's all been all digital. So I think that's where a lot of the leap forward in my art has been, lighting, color, design, just finally resisting the urge to do digital, because I'm an old man and I like to do it the old way, but it's better.
Was it very difficult for you to change from the traditional style to digital, or was it just another learning process?
It was difficult in that, I didn't have, Well, let me go back to when I was doing the Kali Saga. I was, I drew everything by hand, and then I was doing all the coloring on the computer, but it didn't have a tablet. I was doing all of the coloring and shading and stuff with a mouse, which my other comic friends said was insane. And now that I have a stylus, I agree it was insane. So once I finally, gave up the tactile need to draw it with pen and paper, it was just a matter of learning how to use the technology. And the Metabang Paint is a fantastic free app that you can download onto tablets and phones. I highly recommend it to anybody that can't afford, a Syntac or whatever, because I'm doing wonderful stuff with it. My friend Jim Riot, he's been doing some amazing stuff. He's the one who told me about this program, and I'm like, holy crap, and it's free. And having a phone the size of your hand, helps to be able to draw too. But and the pens that come with the Galaxy Note line are the most responsive that I've used. I tried a lot of different ones. I've tried the ones on iPads and everything. These things are super responsive and wonderful to work with.
I haven't heard James Wright's name in a long time, to be honest, and I haven't been following his recent stuff. I'm gonna have to catch up with him on that.
Yeah, he hasn't been doing any sequential work for a while. He works a pretty insane job where he doesn't have that kind of time, but he's been doing a lot of really cool, like Doctor Who mashup stuff, just like pinup type stuff, and he's doing some awesome stuff. Nice. He's got he's on Twitter, he's on Instagram, posting this stuff. He's doing some really cool stuff.
And are you sharing your stuff on social media, or are you just focusing on the comic?
Yeah. No, I have my website. I'm part of the Comicadia network. Basically, it's a collective with some other wonderful comics. But then I'm also I have my FinMagic Facebook page, which is sort of, I've been using that as sort of my blog. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm FinMagic everywhere you can possibly be. So it's PHINMAGIC. If you punch that in, you'll see all the social media, all my websites, everything.
Well, I don't have to ask.
But I just can't seem to do, I don't do Snapchat. I don't understand why I would want to do that. But, but I'm on all the other stuff, Twitter, Tumblr, all that kind of stuff.
I think TikTok would be good for your art.
My family was trying to convince me that I should get TikTok. I don't understand it, so maybe I'll download it and see what I can do with it. But
I think,
yeah,
especially for what you do art wise, there's a lot of creative people that way that just showcase like a quick sketch of their drawing and coloring and whatever, and it's like a massive following. Yeah, it's a huge thing for artists. Okay,
I'll definitely have to check it out and see if that'd be something I could do.
And here's the funny thing about it: it's only like a minute. It's a minute long videos is all you have to do.
Okay.
So quick sketch here, quick coloring there, boom, done. Speed it up.
I will keep it in mind.
You got 30 years of comic you should showcase. Use all the tools you can.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely.
I've been big on the social media presence, like just trying to push myself more from a creative standpoint, and hopefully see the other artists that I get to talk with have the same thought process, because as you know, artists are mainly introverted people for the most part, and it's good to kind of break out of that mold every so often to showcase what you can do.
And weirdly, I'm not introverted in the slightest. If you've ever met me in person, I'm fairly loud and outgoing. In college, I did theater, so I hung out with all the theater people. I was in the theater fraternity, so I did a lot of acting and along with the animation and the drawing and stuff like that. And if you ever met me at a convention, I'll talk to anybody about anything for any length of time.
Nice. So you're about one of maybe 5 people that I know of that are extroverted and creative from an artistic perspective. So that's good.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gosh. But in looking at obviously being in theater and being an artist as you are, and kind of looking at your background there, I think it's safe to say that you are a true geek / nerd of the highest order. Not the first order, but the highest order.
Well, yeah, the first order.
That's why I throw that pun in. What is your real house?
What's my wheelhouse?
Yeah, your real house.
Fantasy. I would say fantasy. I've never been one to do like superhero comics. I never really drew Superman, Spider-Man. Dungeons and Dragons is sort of like the Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars are like the 2 big influences on me. I love the mythology of Star Wars, but I don't really draw sci-fi. I'm really terrible at drawing spaceships and stuff like that. But Star Wars has the samurai sword and sorcery, in space type thing going. And then Dungeons and Dragons was a huge influence on me. The role-playing aspect of it, the monsters and the wizards and everything. When I decided that I want to teach myself how to draw, it was largely drawing like Dungeons and Dragons characters and monsters and stuff. If you read my comic book, I've got Grell and Beholders in it, So I haven't played role-playing games in many, many years because I've been too busy drawing and working. But that background was hugely influential on me. And I actually have my own role-playing game.
Oh, really?
That my friend John Burris and I created in college. He came up with the core rules, and then I helped expand it, and I did all the design. And if you go on my website, under trade paperbacks, you can actually buy the role-playing game. And it's basically set in the Phineus universe. It's a super, flexible gaming system using D10. Again, I haven't played any role-playing game in many, many moons, but it's always like a love of mine and an influence.
It's funny because D&D has come up a lot in my last couple of interviews in general. So the last maybe 6-10 people that I've interviewed have been huge fans of D&D, and it's something that I've never gotten into, but I'd love to get into it. I know it's been a while since you've done something like that, though. What would be a go-to character for you when you would be doing D&D?
Well, you would think that because I have a comic book about a wizard, it would be wizard, but no. I always, in any role-playing game, always play a dwarf. Any kind of dwarven type character. One of the main characters in Phineus, or in the Phineus universe, is Ragnar Grimm. He's the tattooed electric dwarf that has been in a lot of the Phineus comics with his buddy Maynard, brother Maynard, the cyborg priest. But I always play dwarves in every version of every role-playing game. Even when I play Warhammer 40,000, I have a squat army. And the dwarves in my comic are based loosely on squats from Warhammer 40K. I just love dwarves. Gimli from Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite characters. When I played Shadowrun, I had a dwarven street mage. So yeah, dwarves. I just they're like little short Vikings in space,
Short Vikings in space. I like that. Now, it's not because you're 6'6" that you want to play a race that's under 6 foot. Is that the other reason?
I like the dichotomy of it, I guess.
Yeah. I was like, that's ironic, So I think for me, it was like I always enjoyed the halfling and dwarf type characters just because I'm literally the size of a dwarf, so it kind of works out well. And the same muscle structure, except I can't grow a beard, so half dwarf.
Oh, okay. Half dwarf.
Anyhow.
Yeah, actually, I at some point I do have a halfling druid character that I played in college. He was one of my characters, Pontormo, which I named after a Renaissance artist that I do want to do some stories about. I have way more stories rumbling around in my head than I have time to actually do them. But I do want to do like a high fantasy type comic set in the Hollow Earth, which is like basically the Phineus world, but inside it. Whereas it's basically just like a regular fantasy comic. So at some point in time, I'll get around to it. So just got to keep drawing.
There you go. Yeah. Just write it down in a little notebook, and eventually you'll get to it for sure. Like,
oh yeah, I get notebooks and sketchbooks full of jotted down ideas, and the key is to get them all done, before I get too old.
Or just make sure you have the kids do all the work for you. That kind of works out.
Yeah.
It's not slave labor.
My daughter Emily draws, so I gotta get her creating comics too.
There you go.
She just generally likes to draw frogs, though.
It's funny. I have a frog story that I'll have to talk about later that I have the full script for that I was going to make into a comic.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but I just don't have the drawing capabilities. So, anyhow.
Actually, the first issue of the 30th anniversary story arc is going to, without giving away too much, different eras of Phineus in it. So you'll have, Phineus Boy Wizard, Teen Wizard, the different eras. And the Boy Wizard is going to be fighting a bullywug, which is, if you know Dungeons and Dragons, is basically a humanoid frog guy. So I think that'll be fun to draw a frog guy.
Something different.
Yeah, definitely.
With everything that you've done, though, have you been able to do everything you've thought of, or you're just kind of biding your time so that you can break out the next big story idea you're building up?
Yeah, I've done a lot of what I have planned, but I have other stuff that I have planned out that has to take place in the future. And some of that will be touched on in the upcoming story arc that we'll be going through the rest of this year. I've taken a little bit of break over the holidays, and it's been a little challenging to get back into the swing of things, but then this new story arc will touch on some of that. Probably just a taste to foreshadow what will happen in the comic coming up. But my brain is full of stories, so there are constantly new ones popping up. So to answer your question, no, I have not done everything that I have planned. Hopefully the stories just keep coming. So because I do have an end plan for the story, but the end happens in 500 years. I have some time to tell the story.
Perfect for the life of a dwarf, not so much for a human.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone has one or two people that kind of inspired them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
Well, I already mentioned Chuck Jones. Meeting Chuck Jones, and anybody who doesn't know who Chuck Jones, I don't know what you're doing listening to this or watching this podcast, but Chuck Jones was animation hero of mine. He did all of the best, Bugs Bunny, Tom and Jerry, Ricky Tikki Tavi, the Grinch. He was a huge influence on me, and especially getting to meet him my senior year in college. Obviously George Lucas was a huge influence, basically taking modern myth and turning it into something different, doing mythology in space. Joseph Campbell, his whole treatise on mythology and the different, the monomyth, they've all been hugely influential on how I tell stories. Art-wise, I think my biggest influence, art-wise and the way I tell stories in comics, Matt Wagner. Matt Wagner, of course, created Mage, all the versions of Mage, Grendel, as well as doing different stories for DC and Marvel. And as well as he started off doing art for Dungeons and Dragons. But his art style, you can see a lot of it, at least, especially in my early art. You can see a lot of his influence there. But even the way that he tells stories is very. I've aped it quite a bit. Bill Willingham was a big influence. Again, another artist who started off doing Dungeons and Dragons art. He's a writer, artist. Yeah, those guys have been hugely influential on how I do what I do. Along with guys that I've been friends with in the industry. The indie comics like Adam Black and James Riot, Raven Perez, the buddies here in Pittsburgh like DJ Kaufman. The guys that I've worked with like Brian Babiock and Scott Headland. Just doing comics with them, around them. I'm hugely lucky to be in the city that I'm in, because Pittsburgh has a very large indie comic scene. A lot of people that do comics and do web comics are right here in the city. So it's been so helpful to be able to pick the brains of these people. And I've been doing the comics for 30 years. I've been I used to do a lot more shows than I do now, but doing Comic Cons and being able to meet other people doing the same thing as me, and to see where they've gone. Just sort of picking the brains of everybody that will take the time to talk to me. Really,
from a professional standpoint, you've been doing this comic for 30 years. You've met a lot of great people in the industry. You've created so many books, and you have professionally done so much in your career so far. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
That's a tough question. I do. I have done more comics than most people have, and I'm still doing it. A lot of people have given up. A lot of people who started doing comics when I started don't do them anymore. The fact that I'm still doing it, I guess, shows perseverance or just stupidity. Either or. I'm still doing it, and I think I'm still doing I'm doing better stories now, and I feel like I've done well with that. Would it be better if I could make a living at it? Sure, but I do okay. I have daytime job to help keep the house over our heads, and health insurance and all that, and I'm okay with doing that during the day and working on the comic when I can. So yeah, I'd say that I think I've done all right for myself, and I'm going to continue to plug away at it.
And you're doing well too, so that's the main thing. Your health is there.
Thank you.
So your health and your comic are there, so that works out. The reverse of success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Basically, like, if I fail at something, I just keep doing it. Well, one of the biggest failures is self-motivation. It can be really, really hard to, especially this past year with the pandemic, just being motivated to continue to keep doing stuff. And take a break, and then just come back at it. I guess the biggest failure that I could have would be to give up, and I refuse to do so. If I do fail at something, I just look at it and figure out how I can do better. When you've done a couple thousand comic pages, you see some pages are failures. You just learn from those mistakes and don't do it again.
Just as Chuck Jones was an inspiration to you, the younger generation are looking at your comic and becoming inspired as well. And with a 30-year career, you have many generations of young individuals that are inspired by your work. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
I think the main thing is just keep doing it. It's not always easy to do independent comics, because you're not making any money, but you gotta do the comics because you need to do the comics. You know, I know myself and a lot of the people that do this, we have all these stories stuck inside our heads, and we need to get them out and share that. So the people that come after me need to do the same thing. Just keep doing it because you have to tell stories, because you want to tell stories. Um, and not get discouraged if you're not making a lot of money or any money at it. You just need to just keep doing what you're doing, and inspire people through your actions and the work that you make.
Is there anything that I missed that you'd like to let everyone know about before I ask about the social media and the show?
No, I just, if you've never read my stuff, head on to my website. There's much to read. I've got thousands of pages there. Don't be put off by how much there is, because there's always, good places to start and read. But just support your indie artists. If it's not me, anybody else doing the indie comics, doing web comics, support them, share them, read them, join their Patreons, and keep us all doing what we love to do.
That ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. Barry, thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and tell everyone where they can find you social media wise, and we'll end the show that way.
Okay, well, my main website is PhinMagic, PhinMagic.net, and all of the various comics I do are linked there. And if on any of the social media platforms, if you type in PhinMagic, I will show up. If PhinMagic, it's again PhinMagic on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Tumblr. If I do decide to do TikTok, it'll be PhinMagic as well. So if you type PhinMagic into Google, you'll find all my stuff, all my links, all of my social media.
Wonderful stuff. Thanks so much, Barry. And
thanks for having me.
You got to come back every year or two, maybe not every 10 years, because that seems a little too long.
Absolutely. Anytime, man.
Good stuff. Well, like I said, that ends this episode. Of course, you can find this interview and all the other interviews on Two Geeks Talking, of course, at tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's the word two, not the number two. You can find this interview on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/c/TGT Media. I finally got it named properly and branded, so that's a good thing. And that took years to do. But take the time to go through this interview and the thousands of others that I've had on the show in the past. Like a video, comment, and subscribe if you could, please, because I'm still demonetized since 2018. So, I do all this stuff for free. A little money here and there from monetization would be helpful. And it takes you to subscribe to do that. So I appreciate it. Tune in next week for another great interview on Two Geeks Talking, where everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for watching and listening. Hey, all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking. If you like this video and these quick clips here, make sure you take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGT Media. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe as well. Hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, of course, from videos like this here. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching over the years, and keep listening and watching for new and exciting interviews with talented and creative people in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. Thank you so much.